kind of like to give us a moment of silence. Uh, no, guys, welcome to another episode of the Dreamer Cypher, March 17th, 2021. So, obviously, you guys know Scott, you know me, and we have a new guest tonight, Rochelle. I've literally just talked to Michelle for like 30 seconds before going live. So I'm excited to hear and see the direction of where this goes. If you are catching this live, hashtag live is always great. Feel free to chime in. If you would like an invite to jump in, feel free. And then, of course, if you're catching this on the replay, hashtag replay. So I'm always curious, Rochelle, from the few seconds that we got a chance to talk before going live and your kind of conversation or interaction with Scott, any expectations or any ideas to kind of what we'll be talking about this evening?
Basically, we're just going off the rails, like no subject off limit.
Perfect. Yeah. That's pretty much how it goes. So, I mean, not much to describe, but you just never know. Like I said, I always kind of like to give a little bit of a preference or update on that. So, because I don't know you, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just kind of sharing a little bit about kind of who you are, what you do, and maybe give us a 30-second Tinder profile about yourself.
Well, I'm in Colorado Springs. I've worked in one form of advertising or another since 2003. Right now, I currently publish a magazine. It's
Nice.
a little local community magazine. And born and raised in Colorado, girl.
Oh, native. Nice.
Native Coloradoan.
So we got 2 native sons and 1 native girl. That's awesome. Yeah. In Colorado in general or Colorado Springs?
I grew up in Colorado Springs, but I left for 10 years. I lived in Denver, and then I lived in Fort Collins.
Okay.
And then came back again.
Because it's the best here, right?
Yeah. It's so beautiful. I forgot how big the peak was when I came back, and I was like, wait, was it always this big?
No. I remember growing up when Powers and Barnes was expansion. Remember, they used to have it all closed off with a big old road closed sign and everything. So it's kind of funny though, and it is nice to always meet another local just because you'd never know. It seems like that the locals find each other, and it doesn't matter if it's 2 years ago, 10 years ago, but once you find them, you kind of like band together. So I'm glad that we have that in common.
Absolutely.
Cool. I'm very, very familiar with the publications and things like that. I actually just spoke with 2 different ones last week. One of them was, last name was Blackburn, I believe, and then an older gentleman. Scott was actually there when I did the other one the other day. Was on the phone for probably a long time. So yeah. So Paisley, hey, how you doing, lady? Thank you so much for tuning in on Twitch. Appreciate you being here. So Rochelle, the way that we have this set up is we actually have it streaming to multiple platforms. So it's pretty interesting because we have a digital presence, which I kind of built prior to doing the lives on stream and things like that on a channel called Twitch. And primarily known for gaming, but I actually built a tribe for art and poetry and showcasing a lot of artists and things like that. So for me, it's kind of an interesting spot because I'm intermingling a digital world that I built a following, and then the business world on Facebook with friends and family, and kind of putting the peanut butter and jelly together. So it's kind of interesting. But I want to maybe hear from somebody who's never been on here from your perspective in terms of how do you feel about business being kind of like in this digital format now and kind of unlike anything that we've ever seen in the past? So, Jay?
It's definitely different, I would say. I mean, I was used to, before being in advertising, just walking into businesses face to face. And it's definitely a different set of skills to sharpen when you're doing things on the phone and on Zoom. But I feel like it's been good overall because I think it's giving people, their learning curve. And also just kind of sharpening different skills that maybe you had neglected for a while. Just being able to have good phone etiquette and being able to convey emotional things without having that face to face. And then on Zoom, it's been, I think, very personal, like, because most people are like in their homes and you're kind of seeing in the background, like, a side of them that maybe you would never been able to see in the business world. And I think that can be really good in a lot of ways.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thank you so much for the perspective. Dr. G says, Scott, you look cold, bro. Hashtag live.
Pretty much. It's snowing right now,
like
so door's open.
Yeah, you look like you're coming in from Hoth, Star Wars reference. So, so we've got a couple of people from a couple of different platforms here. Patrick James Voz says, I just came in to say that's a fire hoodie, Patrick. Okay, bye guys, have fun. Thanks so much, man. That's funny. So, traditionally in the past, we've kind of talked about just some things that maybe we come across or some interesting news. And I think this may be the first time since we started this that I actually don't have something to talk about, which is really, really weird. I feel weird saying it, and people probably don't believe me right now. So, Rochelle, with you being kind of in this entrepreneur world and things like that, I want to switch it up to what we normally do, mostly because don't really have anything in particular. But what are some things that, like, where is maybe the weirdest place that you've ever closed business from?
Well, I've mostly closed business in people's place of business or their homes. So sometimes it is definitely interesting when you're sitting around their kitchen table. But probably the funniest place that I've ever closed business was with a medical marijuana shop. And I actually sold them a website, and I spent probably 2.5 hours there, setting up asking different questions about the website. And through that time, customers were coming in. So they were kind of helping customers. And yeah, I walked out of there and I had to go to 2 meetings with my boss that afternoon. And I didn't realize until I got to the meeting that I was high.
Yeah.
With the contact. So this is the first meeting that we went to, my boss and I. He noticed that I was acting a little bit strange, and I was kind of talking off the rails, weird. And so he asked me to open my laptop so that we could show them the presentation. And he said it legit took me like 45 seconds to open up the laptop because I did it like in slow motion.
Oh, man.
So finally he just like grabbed the laptop from me, and he has a really dry sense of humor. So he made a couple like really dry jokes, which I had a delayed reaction to each joke. And the other people in the room were like, ah, ha, 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 very funny, because it was a dry, not very funny joke. And my delayed reaction was after everybody else stopped laughing, and I just went, ha! Like a really loud laugh. And it was just like one really loud, obnoxious laugh. And so the next meeting, he was like, what happened? What's wrong with you? And I told him, well, I was at the pot shop and closing this website, and I think I'm high. And so the next meeting we went to was with a real estate agent, and her husband came to the door because we met her at her house, and he offered me a beer like when I first walked in, and I was like, sure. And then he was like, no beer. But yeah, it was pretty funny. Yeah, he pretty much told that story to everybody at work after that, and they made fun of me. So that was probably like the weirdest afternoon I've ever had selling advertising.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. What about you, Scott? Where's like maybe the weirdest place that you've ever closed business or locked a deal down?
Technology, the bad thing with technology is with cell phones, it allows you to do business anywhere. So
don't you dare say the bathroom. Don't you dare say the bathroom.
Conversations, man. Like, you don't see anything. So hey, that's technology does give you that leeway. If you got to, you got to.
Well, like most of the deep, well thought out thoughts and the most longest paragraphs come from people who are like on the pot. You know what I mean? And completely different on the pot from Rochelle. So, I think for me, and again, it's nowhere near as cool as Rochelle's story, but for me, being in the line at Disney World, Was how I was able to close business, and I was like 6 months in, but we had already planned it. We skipped it the year before that we were supposed to go, so there's no way that my wife is going to allow me to miss it this time. She gave me some time to work, but then just phone calls happened, and I was sitting there, and so I'm like sitting there like three-way phone calling with my friend John, who was helping me, and I'm like, John, can you go ahead and log in for me? Can you go ahead and get this issue? And I'm like, hold on, let me switch back to the client. And meanwhile, the kid behind me is like, sitting there like complaining about Toy Story and the wait and stuff. I'll wait to get on the Slinky Dog ride and stuff like that. But again, that technology piece, it's so funny just to kind of see like how far we've come along. I mean, literally, you can call somebody across the world on your phone or whatever device you have. It's so insane to me. So, because I remember getting charged for like AOL, and my dad like kicking my butt for going over on that, or having like the AOL Instant Messenger. By the way, fun fact: AOL still makes over $400,000 a year just from their emails.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy, right? So, if I could go back in time and invest into AOL, even for today, like just for the email listings.
Well, I think because I met Rochelle on Monday for the first time, and we were at the networking event. She was on the queue, I was on the queue, and it's interesting because some of the conversations that we had were really like different personality things, and Rochelle's real big into that piece, which is interesting because she finds different things up.
Bro, you're like cutting out and then going into like super like Micro Machine guy super fast. It's like it cuts out and then it tries to catch up, and then like by that point I'm like so I think you said that you met Rochelle for the first time on Monday. She was talking to Q, and then I lost it after that.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I took it off of Bluetooth, that's why. So thank you, technology. But no, like Rochelle's talking about the same things with some different personality pieces. But also, we were talking about how much they're like Wi-Fi of the Force, and I was like, "Oh, this is a conversation that we got to have." So,
dude, it's happening again.
So we were talking about personality types, and then what else?
Mushroom
Wi-Fi.
Mushrooms and Wi-Fi.
Oh, yeah. Psychedelics. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sounds like some stories to be told here. I'm all ears.
Well, I do a lot of research about psychology. I do have a nonprofit that I'm starting. It's actually going to be working with families and friends that have a loved one in a domestic violence relationship. So instead of working with the person that's in the domestic violence, I work with their families and their friends, their support system. Because a lot of times they make a lot of bad mistakes. So in my research, there's a lot of new research about using psychedelics in a psychiatric way, in a therapeutic way. And so my sister, lives in Denver, and mushrooms are decriminalized up there. So she's starting her own little business, with microdosing and using it in therapeutic ways. But it comes with some interesting side effects besides healing your childhood traumas.
Very cool. Did you meet Flip Aguilera at Monday Morning Network?
No, I didn't meet him yet.
Okay, so he's actually like a health and wellness person, and he's actually working with a facility up in Denver right now that actually does a lot of the psychedelics as well for microdosing, and I think they actually have a full-on facility where people can actually check in for rehab and stuff like that. And so he's I think doing some stuff with them. Definitely somebody may worth checking into and connecting with, especially if that's a route that you guys are looking to go into as well, because I think that he could either bring you quite a bit of knowledge or at least connect you with other people who are doing similar things.
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely something that I want to pursue looking into more, and just looking at the benefits from a psychological perfection, and just see where it goes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's cool. So I don't know if I've shared this story with Scott. Did I ever tell you that I had a friend who basically OD'd while I was on the phone?
Wow.
I didn't tell you that story? Okay. So, like all great stories, my friend was down in Texas, right? And I feel like a lot of these crazy stories happen from people down in Texas, not Colorado Springs, right? Because that's how good we are. Uh, no, no, but so um, this was a kid that, like, we're oddly enough, we never met in person. We basically met through Xbox. And I think there's a lot of people that like form these relationships and these friendships as like people of other people that you kind of know, and they come in the chat and you just kind of like play games or whatever. But I'll never forget, like, this kid, he called me one night and he basically said, "Hey man, I really hate to bother you." He's like, "But I need you to keep me awake." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'm crashing." He's like, "Because I need a hit." He's like, "But I gave the last of what I had to my friend who's like, I'm trying to rush him to the hospital right now."
Mm.
And so I'm literally like on the phone and I have no idea what to talk about, and I'm sitting there basically like just talking about Halo because that's the only thing that we ever connected or related to.
Yeah.
And we were literally talking about Halo and conspiracy theory about how Halo is actually a lot of references to the Bible. And it ended up being like this 45-minute conversation. And like by the time that we were done, he was like, "Hey, thank you so much, man." He's like, "I got my friend to the hospital. I'm gonna go pass out now." And he literally like forgot to turn his phone off and like passed out on me in the car. And I was like, "What am I supposed to do? I don't know if I'm supposed to hang up or if I'm supposed to wake him up. I have no idea." It was like the weirdest situation that I've ever been in. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie called Cell or Cellular with Chris Evans. But this lady, I think it's Suzanne Summers, or anyway, she gets locked or kidnapped into this room, and she like shifts like a cell phone, calls a random stranger, and he's on the phone with her the whole time, and like helps her like find her and her kid and all kinds of stuff. It kind of like that whole situation reminded me of that whole movie. It's so weird.
Yeah, that would be weird. And then you're like, what should I do? I don't even know what hospital they're at. I can't call the hospital and say
Exactly. Yeah, because I'm like, I don't know the cops. I don't know what zip code he's in. I don't know where he's at. I don't know if they can ping a tower or all that stuff. I was like, gosh, I was probably like 24 years old or something like that. So I knew nothing of the world. I knew nothing of drugs or narcotics or anything like that. The worst that I'd ever gotten was being contact high, from secondhand smoke. But yeah, it was weird stuff.
Yeah. That's a lot for a 24-year-old person to handle too.
Yeah, I'm 24 years old. Had a 5-year-old kid, and I'm trying to figure out life. Never held a baby until held my oldest, and I'm like, this is crazy. So, anyhow, yeah, random story of the day for you. I don't know, like, do you, Rochelle, like with the psychedelics and stuff like that? When people hear that that's something that you're kind of working with and the microdosing, like, is it kind of like the old school thing, like with marijuana, when people are like, "Oh no, get away from me, shame on you," or do you feel like that there's like this whole new acceptance, where people are like, "Oh, okay, that's cool."
Yeah. Well, I feel like the way that I talk to it or refer to it is, doing it in like a therapeutic way.
Mhm.
I think some people are kind of still in that old mindset, but a lot of people I feel like are becoming more open minded to it. I think that we can thank marijuana for that, because I think that when we first legalized marijuana, everybody was freaking out. And now that it's been years and nothing major's happened. I mean, the world didn't fall apart. Everything's kind of running normal. There's not crazy people running through the street, and people aren't dying. I mean, you can't really OD from marijuana anyways. So I think because of that, I think people are becoming more open-minded to psychedelics and if they have any therapeutic benefits.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool when you see the different effects, right? And that you see you know, um, gosh, it wasn't even too long ago that we saw people who were first introduced, and then now the CBD oil is so prevalent, right?
Right.
And all the good things that are coming from the hemp stuff, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting, and when you look at the effects, in regards to like maybe with memory loss or being able to repress memories and stuff like that because
Yeah.
of maybe trauma, I think that it could be some really great things. So Definitely excited to kind of see more about this journey and your endeavors on that. And, I'm going to just kind of put this out there that you'll come back and kind of update us from time to time to hear more about the journey and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and more of the research as you guys find out. So,
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to.
what's up, Pepper? How you doing? Shout out to Pepper on Twitch. How have the streams been going for you? And give us an update on you. I don't think I've caught you since you switched over. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think basically just because of the surroundings for me and stuff, like, I've never been involved with a lot of hardly anything. I'm not gonna lie and say that I haven't smoked, because I have. But at the end of the day, it was recreational. It was for, before. I don't know. I mean, you're a kid. You go through some of those things, but I have great friends who are in business, right? Like, there's a company here in town called Slice 420 Pizza, and they came here to Colorado specifically because of the CBD, because of their daughter suffering from seizures.
Yeah.
And she went from having like, maybe 4 to 5 a day to literally having 0. And so part of it was the altitude, part of it was also a big portion of it was the CBD piece. And so a lot of people automatically just kind of assume that they can't do anything because it's, they just assume that the name 420 and that they're, a pizza shop for people who want to get high and all these things. But really, for them, the whole thing was basically to support their daughter. And I think they just reported that after 3 or 4 hip surgeries and all these things, that she's fully recovered from that aspect as well. So it's amazing to see, the benefits of a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to, you definitely wouldn't want to say, okay, let's see what kind of, therapeutic benefits like heroin has or something like that, something that could be potentially deadly and also, really affect your brain in a bad way. But there are certain plants out there and that can be helpful, and you have to do the research to find out, what's the good parts and what's the bad part.
Yeah. Shout out to Xenovirus Prime on Twitch as well. Thanks so much for tuning in, man. Hope all is well. And again, Pepper, Xeno, catch us up with you guys. Let us know if you have any questions. We've got Rochelle here. She's a lot of different things. Sounds like kind of like many entrepreneurs. And so if you guys have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. Same with you on Facebook and YouTube as well. Man, Scott, like, I know you've got a very versatile background because of you having this reputation as what we call the yes man. And so I don't know if you know this about Rochelle, but we call Scott the yes man because Scott is always up for a challenge. He's not afraid, which is kind of like, it's one of the cool things about him, right? He's fearless. So for him, I'm sure that he has some stories in regards to either people being maybe affiliated or around those things, or maybe you have some stories about people kind of using some of this stuff for medicinal purposes. So feel free to share anything that you have.
I just know, you look at the research, is it coming through clear now? Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, good. we'll see how long this goes. Technology lately just does not like me, which is okay. I love you, technology, but I think it is interesting because you are seeing a lot of the studies come into play. Because look at like Indian culture, look at caveman culture. That's all they had to be able to do what they needed to heal as a human, to go about, and it's a naturally occurring substance. I believe it was heroin or cocaine. Actually, cocaine. Chef Ramsay actually went out to South America and was watching them how they prepared it, and they were throwing paint thinner, battery acid, all this shit in to make cocaine, and that's okay. But then we get psychedelics, we get marijuana, that's a naturally growing substance, and everybody's like, no, we can't do it because FDA and all them can't regulate that stuff to make profit off of it. Which is unique because now they're legalizing everything in all 50 states for marijuana, but then they're bringing up the fact that you had a lot of these people that were going to jail for the small crime of having a small amount of marijuana. Now they're coming to money off of it, which is such a nutty thing when you think about it. But people are going in, as you're laughing, I know something's going on here.
Well, I'm laughing because I know that by this time tomorrow, the stream will be offline mysteriously for a little while because we're going to have to suck the Zuck.
Rochelle doesn't know about this. So it was what, 4 weeks ago?
Okay, so Rochelle, it seems like that every time that we drop some sort of truth bombs on here, either about censorship or about things like that, Facebook mysteriously takes away our videos for a long period of time or extended period of time, which is usually kind of the highest time that you get your views. But what's so interesting, watching, this is probably definitely going to take this away, is somebody sent me a message on Instagram that basically was showing Zuckerberg essentially going against his own terms of service in regards to vaccinations, because it was basically saying that like we can't talk about the vaccinations and how they're not basically you can't talk about how they're not being helpful or whatever. And he turns around and posts a video that says like, oh, well, we can't say that, that these things are great because of, we don't know the long-term effects yet, blah, blah, blah. So he's literally kind of like breaking his own terms of service. But of course, like, it's okay for him to do it, but we can't do it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Let's see. So Nicole says, really has been good to see and learn the benefits of medical marijuana, CBDs. I look forward to hearing more about the nonprofit and all those she will be able to help, since domestic violence help is greatly needed. And that's an interesting point of view as well, because I don't know if I know enough to be able to speak on that, but what does that look like, or what is the correlation between a lot of people maybe going and using the psychedelics or things like that with the domestic violence? Is there a big correlation in regards to how that helps that? Or, I guess maybe trying to better understand Nicole's reference here.
Well, when it comes to domestic violence, you are typically working with somebody who does have someone who has a lot of past trauma. And that's the reason why they get into toxic relationships and continue the trauma cycle in their own life. And it's not to blame the victim, because the victim doesn't really know, why they are attracting, more and more different violent people into their life. But what happens when you go through trauma is it really messes with the dopamine structure of your brain. So what people don't realize, and this is why I work with the family and the support systems for people who are in a domestic violence, instead of actually working with the domestic violence victim themselves, is because the family and the loved ones of that person don't realize that the reason why this person is in this type of toxic relationship is that they are an addict. And what happens when you're around a toxic person is that instead of running the relationship on serotonin, they tap into the dopamine structure in your brain, and it actually changes your brain. So so people say, oh, I don't know why, but I always attract a really bad person into my life, a toxic man or toxic man or woman into my life. And I don't understand why I just am a bad picker, I think was what some people say. And what the interesting thing is that you don't have in that scenario, you don't have relationships, you have addictions. So you are addicted to toxic people. And you would say, well, why would you be addicted to somebody who is harmful to you? Well, when you look at the brain scan of someone who's in a toxic relationship or someone who's in a cult, because the brain scans are the same. So if you are in a abusive relationship or in a cult, it's the same exact thing. You're just in a cult of one. And the brain scan is the same as the brain scan of somebody who is addicted to gambling. And it makes sense, because toxic people put you on a mean, sweet cycle when you don't know when they're going to be mean and you don't know when they're going to be sweet. And it's very unpredictable. And just like when you go gambling, you don't know if you're going to lose all your money or if you're going to hit the jackpot. But because of that, because of the dopamine hits, it's very exciting and it's very addictive. And that's what people don't realize. And then when somebody who has that addictive type of brain are around a normal person and try out a normal relationship, it seems very boring to them, because it's very even, very steady, and there's not the high highs and the low lows. And so you really become your worst enemy. And the people around you who are supporting you really don't understand your behavior at all. And sometimes end up giving up on you because they don't know why you keep going back to a harmful situation.
That totally makes sense. And that's crazy to think that, like, it, and I get it, I think, because I think the brain itself goes back to what it knows, right? And whatever is familiar. And there's a safety net in that itself. Even if it is a hostile environment, you maybe don't know better, right? And that's really crazy and really scary because, I mean, you think of abused children also become the abusers because they didn't learn that it was any different, or that's their experience and things like that. And again, trauma and rape victims and abusive relationships, so it's really, and you can tell that you've done so much research in regards to that and understanding that process. So thank you both for highlighting those things, because like, from that perspective, it's so easy for somebody like myself to turn around and be like, yeah, I support something like that because I know it's going to good use. Obviously, just like anything else, there are people that are using it for recreational or for whatever, other purposes, just to get high or whatever. Again, not to say that, who am I to judge, right? Because if we're judged off of all those things, man, I definitely don't deserve to be sitting here with you guys, right? So, wrong, right, whatever it is, I mean, it's just a point in time of, that's just kind of how it is at the moment. But, again, thank you so much for bringing that perspective, because I think that a lot of people would just kind of automatically assume, like, oh no, that's, we're just opening the gateways or whatever.
Yeah.
But again, it just comes down to the individual and what they're trying to do with it. And again, wrong or right, I don't know if it's better for government to be involved with that so they can earn a profit or not. What I mean? Because at some point, then I feel like then at that point we should start policing the police too, and again, is that right as well? And then it kind of gets into a whole different ground of places that I don't necessarily want to be in, or the conversations that I want to have. So,
well, and the reason why I think psychedelics are good as far as like helping people overcome their trauma is it really creates, when you have gone through traumatic experiences, and especially if you've had a lot of trauma in your life, so you don't have just PTSD, which PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, comes from a one-off experience, so one-off trauma, a one-off car accident or shooting or something like that. But when you have complex PTSD, like from your childhood, where you lived sort of in a trauma soup all the time, so you marinated in constant amounts of trauma, to where your nervous system is always ticked up, your nervous system is always ratcheted up, and so your nervous system never learns how to calm itself down. And there's so many different therapies that you can do, psychological therapies, to try to calm the nervous system. There's yoga and there's meditation and breathing exercises. But what a lot of the research has found is that's not enough of a safe place to create. Your brain can't heal because because it's learned all of these, these bad coping skills from childhood. So the only way to calm that nervous system down and get your body into a place where it is calm enough to sort of work through the trauma without re-traumatizing yourself. Psychedelics are great for that. And especially when you're doing, like, start with microdosing and you're not, hitting the system with a lot at once, because then that would just be for recreational. But in the therapeutic environment, it's really good because you can calm the nervous system in a way that you can actually revisit the trauma without freaking yourself out, without ratcheting up your nervous system again. So it's really effective as far as people who want to confront their old traumas and break bad habits that have been honestly rooted in you for 20, 30 years.
Well, I find it interesting.
Go ahead.
I find it interesting because I don't know if you want to share the story that you talked to Rochelle about, kind of going through with the body, with what you experienced. But it's unique because we had talked about the book Your Body Keeps Score, and it's such a unique thing about how the body is a very complex machine, and how like keep score, but a lot of times we don't really dive into that. We try to do other things, and it really, I tell people, I'm like, a lot of the stuff is an internal work for all of us. Like, we have to go inside and work. So I don't know how much you want to get in that one, because I know there's some of that personal story for you in there that you had kind of talked about with Q and I. But I think it's unique that if people really understood this, how different our society would look in regards to this type of piece of items that we're talking about with trauma and whatnot.
Right. Well, I have complex PTSD from my childhood. So I think, and I know for sure that when you have one form of PTSD, then you are more likely to get PTSD for further traumas in your adult life. But one thing that happened to me, which was really interesting, and it made me realize how much the body does keep the score and how much your body is really there for you and is there always protecting you, when sometimes we think our body is our worst enemy. And with my story, it was 2008. I had a situation where I went to see a client and they tried to sexually assault me. Luckily, I was able to get away, and I called the police and the sheriff's department and went and had to give a statement, and they went and questioned him, and there was charges and things like that. But what ended up happening to me over the next 10, 12 years is I just put on like a ton of weight. And I had always never really struggled with my weight much before. I had my son, and, my weight went down. After that, I probably had, a little bit extra on me after becoming a mom, but nothing out of the ordinary. And I was going through a lot of extreme measures to try to lose the weight. I was getting more and more extreme with different types of exercising, and more extreme with dieting and things like that. And just nothing was happening. It was just staying on, and everything was steady. And I went through an experience where I saw myself step into basically like a pair of overalls, and I was kind of like pulling one strap up on one side and pulling the other strap on the other side. And I realized when I was looking down that I was putting on a bodysuit of a fat person. And it was this complete realization, this complete aha moment, that instead of cursing my body and saying, hey, why won't you get with the program? And why won't you lose this weight? I'm doing all these extreme things. And instead of looking in the mirror and being really disgusted with myself, which how I was before, I looked in the mirror and I thanked my body. And I really saw my body as trying to be there for me and to protect me. And so it wasn't soon after that I started having an easy time losing the weight, and weight started coming off. And instead of every day getting up and looking in the mirror and cursing my body and being hard on myself, I was getting up every day and I was loving my body, and I was saying, thank you so much for putting this layer of protection around me and making me feel like I was secure, even though it's not secure, because people who are overweight, they still get raped and sexually harassed and things like that too. So, just because you gain weight doesn't mean that you're going to be impervious to unwanted sexual advances. But at the same time, my brain did what it thought it was necessary, and that was to put that layer of protection around me. And so it's actually true.
Man.
Your body's your best friend.
That's so incredible. And I want to go back and I want to clip just that piece specifically for a lot of people to hear, because, man, we are our worst critics, right? And our minds, along with our bodies, are so unique in the fact that, like, we can be so harsh on ourselves and be so unkind to ourselves, but yet we can be our number one supporter to ourselves to pull us out of the worst of worst and the worst of situations and scenarios. And so, the different layers that we have as human beings, right? And even just when you look at the statistics of the odds of us becoming a human being, right, are so highly, like, they're against us.
It's like 1 in 4 million is your odds of becoming a human, is 1 in 4 million.
Right. That's crazy already enough as is. So, I mean, to turn around and for somebody to, to not even look at that, right? Because when you look at that in terms of context, whether it be a number, whether it be, and again, the easiest way for most people to translate numbers is in dollar signs, right? But still, when you think about the numbers, I mean, that's pretty huge, right? I mean, I think you have equal chances of winning a large lottery number, right? Something like that. So, but the fact that, that that was something you were able to pull through and understand, and to be able to do that and to realize the effects of it. And, just because you start taking medicine, just because you start, taking the steps to kind of improve or work on your body, for whatever the reason being, a lot of people forget that it's been years of damage as well.
Absolutely.
Right. And so it's going to take years of reversing those things and changing those habits and putting yourself into, those situations. So thank you so much for highlighting that. I think that was huge. And anybody that is catching this either live or on the replay, I think that, you need to share that piece with yourself, with your family, because we all know somebody who's basically struggles with it, whether it's, how they feel about their physical appearance or how they feel, I mean, just, you never know what people are going through. So thank you so much for that, Rochelle.
Thank you. And it's definitely interesting how it took me so many years to tie two and two together. I mean, when you're really thinking out of your analytical brain all the time and you're trying to break things down with logic, it doesn't work. And so sometimes, just like with the microdosing, it actually kind of slows down, I think, that part of your brain, sort of like the mouse on the wheel, just running around getting nowhere, to where you can actually listen to what your body has to say versus listen to what your brain has to say. Like that saying, like, don't believe everything you think. And when you actually, and that's where I think the meditation and being quiet is going to help you listen to what your body, because your body is going to always speak truth to you. It's never going to tell you a bunch of analytical bullshit. It's going to speak to the truth.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, the interesting thing Rochelle was talking about too was when it comes to mushrooms, like there's a documentary that she was telling me, like mushrooms in the forest are like the Wi-Fi of the forest. And it's unique to see that. But then we are also talking about the water experiment, the Japanese guy that did the water experiment, and how the power of your words and how you're speaking to things are very powerful. I'll have Rochelle get into that more, but it's very, very unique in regards with that piece of what comes out to scientific studies.
Yeah, there is a study about there's a Japanese guy who did a study where he took all these hundreds and hundreds, I think thousands of droplets of water, and he had people come in from all different types of religious backgrounds. So he wasn't using just like one type, but different shamans and things and spiritual teachers, and they all blessed and they said lovely things to the one droplets of water, and then he froze them. And then on the flip side, he had hundreds of people come in and say a bunch of mean, horrible things to the other droplets of water. And then he froze those. And, the droplets that were kind of infused with the prayers and the love, when they froze and then they put them under a microscope, they had all of these beautiful symmetrical crystals that had formed in the water droplets. And the ones that had just been spoken to with ugly things and hate, of course, none of their crystals were symmetrical, and they were all jagged and uneven and, and unbeautiful. And so, it makes you think, like, if you are speaking that to the water droplets, but what is our body is all made up of water and cells and things like that too. So if you're speaking love to your own body and to your own self, it's going to come through, through your cells. And then if you're speaking to yourself in a way that's hateful, it's going to come through as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were kind of talking about a couple of concepts earlier today. Scott and I actually had a meeting with another business owner, but I've heard of this before with like plants, right? Just basically like plants respond to your energies. And so they did a study of basically people who basically talked positively to the plants, right? And as they were watering them, and and then they also turned around and they had these plants while they were watering them, basically projecting negative thoughts like lighting the plants on fire or whatever, causing harm or whatever. And the ones that basically, again, same amount of water, same amount of everything, TLC, just the different attitudes that would go with it. And the ones that basically had a lot of the negativity would wilt a lot faster, right? And so, but I've also heard of the ice cubes as well. When you're drinking water, same thing. Positive thoughts go into the ice cube. Supposedly, the same thing with this, with the different patterns and things like that under a microscope or whatever. And then also even the taste supposedly is impacted, right? So a lot of people hate water. Supposedly that there's been tests basically because they're negative people, and people who really love water and are, kind of more positive thinkers and positive outlook people really love the water. And so you got to kind of wonder, like, is there a certain connotation,
which I think is unique, because that's the one thing. So got to give a shout out to our sponsors, Tabala's Food for Thought with Jasper Axelrad for her drive with community. But with Rock City Cafe, I expressed that their food was beyond delicious. I don't know what that is, but with Ricky and his passion, he does.
Oh, you may have to stop. You may have to stop real quick and then start up again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, kind of. So, so to recap, shout out to Jasper and Tabala Cuisine, and now Rock City Cafe as well.
And the chicken coop.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the chicken coop.
Yes, amazing things over there.
Yeah, their hearts and everything. So.
Yeah. Let's see. So Nicole here says, my nephew did something similar with rice for a science experiment, and the results were crazy. The mean rice was moldy and gross bland, and the nice rice was stuck. That's crazy.
Yeah, I've heard of kids doing that for a take home experiment, and it is crazy where they'll do it one jar. They'll have the same rice, one jar. They speak a bunch of bad stuff too, and it's like a week later, it's brown and green and moldy, and then the other rice is still edible.
Wow, that is crazy. Yeah. Give me one sec, guys. I think I don't know. 1 second here. Sorry, I think I'm sensing tech issues. Like my mic is going crazy or not my mic. My video is going crazy on my side, so I apologize. Yeah, I bet that there's lots of different types of tests that have been done. But I mean, you can use yourself as your own personal experiment, right? I mean, if you write a story or write something positive about yourself every single day, right? Even if you don't believe it, your results versus somebody who maybe is not doing that are going to yield infinitely better results, right? Those people who are committed to doing something, it's like 12 days, I think, right, of doing something consistently to make change and habitual change. So again, I mean, you yourself, you don't take our word for it. Put yourself to the test in regards to some of these things and see what that looks like. And the human body, the human psyche is all really crazy. Scott and I earlier today, there's a new Netflix show that basically talking about the history of curse words. And what was interesting is like the very first episode uses the word fuck, and but what's crazy is that like the words fuck and shit are the only words that can be used in every single piece of a sentence. Right, so you can use it very excitedly, you can use it angrily, you can use it as a noun, you could use it as an adjective or a verb, whatever it is. But the interesting part is that like there's a certain strength and connotation that comes with it, because like it's still, that's the biggest word that is still used to hurt people's feelings. But they were talking about statistically, like there's like a 15% increase in grip strength when you yell the word fuck with it. They also did a study of basically people trying to withstand putting their hands in freezing cold water, and the people who were allowed to cuss versus the people who weren't able to, it was almost double the amount of time that they could withstand the pain and the pressure versus
Wow.
somebody who could not cuss. So when it's interesting, with the words and stuff like that, I did have a poetry mentor years ago who basically kind of taught me that as a writer, having a voice is something that is prevalent, that not only a lot of people are privy to understand or privy to really take advantage of. And it was so crazy when he put into perspective that words are really powerful, because if you think about it, you go back to, witches and things like that, but they used to literally curse you with words, right? If you're coming from a biblical perspective, if you're a person of faith, the book of James talks about how your tongue is a weapon and how it can literally destroy people. But my poetry mentor basically told me that, there's the strongest person or the most influential person back in the day was not the kings and queens. It was the town bard or the town crier. They were the ones to relay the stories between what was happening inside the kingdom and what was happening outside in the world. And so they were kind of the news reports and the politicians kind of like today. And how many wars were possibly started off of lies because maybe they weren't treated right or taken care of, and then if you break down words literally, a lot of those words, a lot of those things that are being said, people tell you exactly how they feel. So if I said, hey, Scott, I want to go ahead and discuss something with you, diss and cuss, right? I mean, it's probably not as good as like, hey, can I chat with you, or can I talk to you about something, right? The tone and the inflection obviously is going to help, but automatically, usually the words discuss, usually it's not going to be a fun conversation, at least not for him, right? And then even the word poetry, poet and tree were not some of the most influential people. Gandhi, Jesus, did they not sit by the tree and teach parables, right? So, it's really interesting when you break down a lot of the words. It's kind of like a numerology, I guess, for words, so to speak, in terms of some of that stuff. The other thing, too, that I never knew is that people actually talk in syllables. So a lot of times their syllables, or how many syllables they talk in, it's kind of like a rhyme scheme or kind of like a poetry type thing. And so some people will almost universally, everybody is kind of on a mutual term, but when you connect with somebody that has the same amount of syllable breadth as you automatically interact with that person so much better. And that's why, like, some people are like, oh man, that person talks so much, because they fill up so many more syllables before they take a breath. Or they're like, man, that person is so slow, because they talk a little bit slower and fill in slower syllables. It's really interesting when you learn some of these things and realize that your voice and your influence really makes a big difference.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like the power behind like the cuss words is you feeling free to express your emotion. And I think that does give you power. And a lot of people say, I've heard that recently. A lot of people say, I don't trust someone who doesn't cuss. And they've shown studies in workplaces, there's a lot of disharmony if they're not allowed to cuss. But I think what the main thing is that they're not allowed to express their emotions. And I feel that when you are around somebody who doesn't use cuss words, it kind of makes you feel like, what emotions are they suppressing? You feel like they must be stifling something at some point. And
Yeah.
a little bit more untrustworthy.
Yeah, for what's really interesting is that I used to be that guy who was like, well, hey, I'm going to respect this relationship, or I'm going to basically come off and paint a picture of that I operate a certain way, but at the end of the day, what I realized then is that, like, if you are trying to take away certain parts of me, right, like, especially as a poet, as a creative writer, there's not a single word that I may or may not need to use to be able to express a certain thing, right? And the difference between like music and writing or poetry is that poetry has endless punchlines. Every single line should be kind of like that devastating killer line, whereas in music you kind of have to set it up. And so as a writer, as a creator, I'm never going to allow somebody to kind of suppress what I can and cannot say, because I need to be able to express myself in true form. I need to be able to use all the words because that's my voice, right? And if you're silencing my voice, like you said, what emotions are they being tied or holding back to themselves? What does that look like? And that's kind of the deeper rooted issue, I think, for a lot of people, is that oftentimes we don't like things about other people, or the things that we dislike about ourselves.
Yeah. And Scott and I were talking about this the other day too, about how there's no such thing as something that is bad, like a bad word. There's no such thing as a bad word. A word is just a word. It's the energy behind it. And we were talking
Yes.
about like this with money. Like money is just a piece of paper. Like a piece of paper doesn't hold that much value. But what it's the value that we give it. Like there was a story about one of the big drug lords down in, I think, either Mexico or South America or something. And he was on the run from the FBI, and he was hiding out his family, had a huge stack of these notes that of paper, but they were worth like $1 million a piece. So he had like $40 million or something, or it was like 400 million, something crazy amount. But him and his family, his children were cold, so he burned those notes that were worth all this money. And so it's interesting to see from his perspective in that moment. They were just useful pieces of paper, but it's the energy behind it. And I think words are exactly the same. I tell my son that all the time, like there's no such thing as a bad word. It's a bad how you use it. And if you use it in a vindictive way to hurt someone, it's bad. But if you use it because you stubbed your toe and you're upset, I don't care about that,
Right. What's up, Jared? It's good to see you, man. Thanks for tuning in. No, I agree wholeheartedly. It's kind of the premise behind it. It's the idea and the thought process behind it, right? And we do it all the time because we're always like, if somebody's like, hey, hope you're having a good day, and you don't like that person, you're like, yeah, I hope the day treats you well too, friend. You know what I mean? There's that kind of undertone of like, fuck you, buddy.
Like in the South, like Texas gals, like when they say, "Oh, bless her little heart," that means
Oh yes,
really nasty.
Yeah, God bless you.
Exactly.
So yeah, people are. It's weird. Not only the body, the mind, the psyche, but the way that we talk, the way all those different things. I mean, it's so complex, right? And it's crazy because a lot of times we don't even appreciate the complexity of our own bodies, of the human body. The human spirit is a whole different type of thing that we could talk about, and I'm sure for days, and have kinds of stories, right? I mean, anything from willpower to kind of almost being almost spiritless for a lot of people, and what does that look like, so super interesting topic today. Unfortunately, we are limited to kind of an hour here for this segment and podcast, but what I always like to say is that just kind of leaves it to make sure that we come back for a second one later down the road. So we do like to end with a couple of different things. So first of all, kind of the round table, which really is just kind of anything that kind of your experience, your take, or anything that you want to express. And then we always end with something called pod decks, which is kind of like some random questions generated for the podcasting section. So first of all, kind of Rochelle, thank you so much for being a guest and your time today. But how was your experience, and what are your thoughts in regards to the Dreamer Cypher?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty fun, and I like how the conversation leads in a different way, and you never know where it's going to go.
Yeah, we love the very natural conversation, and the idea and the process is just like, it's hard sometimes to find that time because we're all addicted to technology, our phones or Facebook or whatever, and so a lot of the interactions we may not be getting as much. And again, yes, it's digital. Ideally, the thought is that we could do this in person, but it's kind of a weird time right now, so this is kind of the next best thing. And then anything in particular, any closing thoughts or anything for you that that you just wanted to kind of had to get out or wanted to get out during this time?
Well, I guess no matter, when it comes to words, when it comes to your body, when it comes to your mind, or even when it comes to maybe, using marijuana or psychedelics, the energy behind it is what's going to make it good or bad. So if you're coming at any situation with an energy of love and an energy of growth and learning, then you'll probably more likely have a better experience. But if you're coming at it with a bad energy of self-indulgence and self-hate or self-harm, then that's probably what you'll get out of it too.
Yep. Yeah, we have a saying, where you spend your time and energy is where you're going to get your opportunities. So, Scott, what about you, man? Any closing thoughts for you or anything that you wanted to talk about?
Let me see. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ah, cool. I had to put it on mute because Jasper's dogs are going nuts right now. So, no. Ultimately, thank you, Rochelle, for taking us up on the opportunity to come on, because usually it's one of these interesting things that if I vibe with somebody, Patrick's the same way. I'm like, we got to have this person come on and have the discussion, because there are different things, and I think also by you having that vulnerability and transparency to share your story, it is another beautiful thing that allows people to understand that it's okay to share your message. I think it's another thing that transparency piece and just being yourself and showing. Thank you for that.
It's so funny. Like the beginning and the end was so clear, but in the middle it started doing that thing again.
Yeah,
So
technology, yeah.
yeah, so that's all right, man. I think we understood the majority of what you were trying to go with there, and yeah. So, do you got some pod deck questions for us?
Yeah, let me jump on there. So if it drops me off, I'll jump back on. And if you guys decide to do what you and Amber did last week, it's all good too.
Yeah, no worries. So some of these random kind of pod deck questions are kind of like, would you rather, or just kind of things that like, but I guess just a quick way to kind of get to know who you are and what you do, and or a little bit about you, and it's just kind of fun to be thrown under the bus, I guess. So, all right. So first question is, if you had to choose one animal to have as a pet, which animal would you choose?
Out of anything?
Mm-hmm.
Well, definitely a cat. We have a new cat, and so I'm all into cats right now.
That's awesome. Before Tiger King, and always as a kid, I always liked the idea of having a tiger. But after watching that, I think I have to change my answer. But I do think it would be cool to have like a polar bear or something like that as a pet. So
yeah, until they grow up.
Yeah.
I don't want any pet that could possibly eat me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear that. That makes sense. Either living or present, if you could pick any celebrity to be able to spend either lunch or a day with, who would you pick and choose, and why?
Well, for sure, Barbara Streisand.
Hmm.
She is my ultimate number one hero. I love the Barbara. My sisters actually make fun of me, and they think I'm like a reincarnated like gay man or something. But no, I've always just really identified with her as a person. I love all of the songs that she sings, and I think what I love about her the most as an artist is how she explains it, is that a song is not a song, or like in your case, a poem is not a poem unless it really is coming from a meaningful place where you really put your emotion into it, and you can tell when you're listening to an artist if they're singing or if they're singing from their emotion.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I think for me personally, Edgar Allan Poe would be one. And again, I wouldn't even want to have a conversation with him. I would just love to see him be at work, right? I mean, because to be able to write an entire book or story to a pentatonic scale to have matching and rhyming, things like that, perfect rhyme scheme, and then also to understand the thought process in regards to who created the idea of what inspired like the Telltale Heart or something like that. You know what I mean? It's really interesting to kind of see what the thought process was. Was it pure madness or pure genius or a little bit of both? It's kind of my thing. Scott, if you're back, we just asked the question: living or in the past, or somebody that passed away. If you could spend either lunch or a day with a celebrity, who would you pick, and why?
It'd have to be Bob Marley. His messages, music was huge. So it'd be Bob Marley just because of what he did with music.
Love it, man. All right, and we'll go with one more question here. Let's go with this one. What would be the perfect crime? And again, we'll start with you, Rochelle.
I don't know. I mean, I guess the only way that you have a perfect crime is that, if you left no trail behind you, and if there's a possible way, especially with this day and age, with there's cameras everywhere. So I think it's becoming almost impossible to have the perfect crime.
I think for me, it's kind of goes back to that kind of like that poetic justice, and the fact that we now have the ability to, like you said, utilize technology. I think there was that documentary again on Netflix where the guy was basically killing cats, right? And he was like he paid very well. He was a good-looking guy, he's a model, and basically the entire community of the internet started finding and tracking these leads and these clues, and they were able to bring justice to this guy and track him down. And so again, it wasn't something that necessarily just the police could do, but it was the ability to utilize technology and have other people involved. And so for me, I thought that was kind of like a beautiful piece in itself, to have a collaborative effort to be able to do something like that. So to me, I thought that was kind of like a perfect crime.
Yeah, well, he thought he could have a perfect crime, but
right,
he didn't factor in the new technology that now is kind of almost impossible.
Right. Yeah. What about you, Scott?
I think it goes into the power of the words, like the perfect crime. Like if you just leave someone speechless and they can't come back with a comeback, that's the perfect crime right there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, man, robbing them of their dignity and robbing them of words to say. Yeah, that's perfect. I love that. Sweet. Well, again, guys, it's been another fun episode of the Dreamer Cypher. Thank you to our guest Rochelle. Also, a big shout out to our sponsors, so the Chicken Coop, Rock City Cafe, and Tabala. This is, man, I can't say thank you enough to these guys. They've done a tremendous job right here in our city of Colorado Springs. But they bring a lot to the table as well, not just food wise, but that was a pun that was intended. But yeah, they just bring so much to the community. So again, do yourself a favor, go and check out these local restaurants and these these bars and food trucks. They're doing amazing things in the community. We will be live next week again with another episode of the Dreamer Cypher. And again, thank you. And then we'll reach out to Rochelle to have her come back on to give us some updates in regards to some of the other stuff moving forward. Thanks again. You guys have a good one.